And I'm going to do a little, well, folks, I was going to do a little live on air producing, but we won't do that quite yet. First of all, thank you for joining me here on KMMU Main Street Media. I am your host, John of Talk with John, here on Main Street Media. Typically, Tuesdays from 4 to 6, you can join me. Um, Today, we're getting a little bit of a start a little late because, well, work sometimes gets in the way of the show. And last week and this week it did both times. So we're here on Main Street Media Utah. You can view these and other shows by going to mainstreetmedia.com, or you can go to our Rumble channel or our YouTube channel or visit us on X. So couple great places to go. And David Pyne, did you receive the link for the show, question mark, in your email? So I'm going to be doing a little on-air producing, but that's okay because I'm excited to be here. So first of all, let me introduce Michael Letts of Invest USA. Michael Letts with Invest USA is the founder, CEO, and president of Invest USA, which provides thousands of bulletproof vests to our first responders, and just a great organization, folks. People you need to look up, and you can go to their website at investusa.org and find out more about them there. Michael, thank you so much for joining us. Shortly, I will be having David Pyne join us from The Real War and davidpyne.substack.com. And I will be introducing him when he joins us. But first of all, Michael, thanks you for joining us.
Well, John, it's always a privilege to be on your show. You've been a great host for the years that I've known you. And let me also let you, because we haven't had the opportunity to do this, let me let your listeners know that I give you due credit for helping bring about the revolution of last Tuesday and the results thereof. It wouldn't have happened without the ability for the American people to truly understand the truth and what was being plotted and what was going on. And you helped provide a venue for that, John. And I thank you. Law enforcement thanks you. And I believe the American people thank you.
Well, I'll tell you, I've said this before. I'm a big supporter of law enforcement, especially on the most local of levels. I can't say I'm as big of a supporter of law enforcement when it comes to the FBI and Homeland Security and so forth, but I'm definitely a big supporter of local law enforcement. And frankly, most of the men in the FBI are good people, Homeland Security and so forth. And I think that's a couple subjects that we want to touch on. But
change is a coming.
Change is a coming. So first things first, let's get to a subject you wanted. There were two subjects that you said you wanted to hit on, and that was the election integrity, immigration, and national security. So I want to say I really like the pick for, I believe it's the border czar.
Tom,
give us his name.
Tom Horman.
Tom.
And Tom is, used to be the director for ICE. Tom's a good friend. I was just in Mar-a-Lago with him a little while back, and I will tell you this about Tom. Tom, besides being what we talk about with the Border Patrol with ICE, he's been a cop in various municipalities, rural areas, and NYPD, and so he's a cop's cop. And what do I mean by that? He believes in one thing that the president believes in, that I believe in, and that is equal justice for all and holding people accountable.
Well, I'll tell you,
accomplished.
I loved his answers to AOC that's been shared. Oh man, when it was like, what do you think about separating families from me? And he's like, well, if I pull over a drunk driver, I'm going to be separating that man from his kids. Let me tell you. I love that answer. Okay, now let me introduce our good friend and my very good friend, David Pyne. Thank you so much for joining. David Pyne is a former U.S. Army's Combat Arms and Headquarters Staff Officer. He used to be in charge of armaments cooperation with the former Soviet Union, Eastern Europe, the Middle East, Africa, and the Americas from 2000 to 2003. David Pyne, you can go to his Substack, The Real War. He is the editor of the Real War newsletter at dpyne.substack.com. There's some other places that you can be reached at. And before I let both of you go, I want you to tell people how they can find you on your individual platforms. But I've been looking forward to this conversation. As I shared with Michael and David, as I shared with Michael and the audience, I not only was really looking forward to this, unfortunately, my work life gets in the way sometimes of doing the show. And it got in the way of it last week, and it got in the way of it this week. But so I'm so glad you're joining me now. There's a number of subjects to cover. We're kind of starting with the border first. But David, thank you for joining us.
Hey, John and Michael, it's great to be with you again.
And folks, it's my fault that David and Michael are joining when they are, because I didn't do an awesome job communicating with either one of them over text and over an email. I didn't do a great job, and they're rock stars to come on. So they got it. They hopped on. Muy bueno. Great guys. Okay. So the new border czar, I am stoked. That may be, in my opinion, my favorite pick that I've heard about so far from Donald Trump. I do have a couple of concerns that are floating around out in the ether a little bit. I've got a few concerns, but overall, so far, I think he's doing fairly well. Definitely better than he did in his first term. Michael, since this is a domestic thing, let's start with you. David, I want you to give your thoughts as well. Michael?
Well, I will tell you this, like we were talking about as David came onto the show. Tom's a cop's cop. He's got plenty of experience. He's got a lot of backbone. Contrary to what we had with the border czar in the last administration, who couldn't find the restroom himself, or his vice president didn't know where she was at half the time. He's drowning in a word salad somewhere. Tom is very direct, very pointed, and he's determined to handle the mission and bring it to fruition, bring it to success. Tom and I were discussing, and here's one of the key things that's important on your show. I want to make sure all your listeners understand. You know, it was an awesome thing, and as I gave you credit, John, that we had Trump elected last week. But folks, that's not the end. That's just the beginning. The roughest days are ahead. I can assure you that the drug cartels, the human sex traffickers, that the terrorists, and that the criminal element who we have knowingly allowed to come into this country, or this previous administration actually, I think, went after criminals to bring them in before they did anybody else, are not going to enjoy being told they have to go home. They're not planning on giving up, I don't think, without a fight. So we're fixing to engage our thin blue line, and Tom is prepared with his folks to begin the process of making sure we get this dangerous element under wrap and key and sitting back in shackles like they need to be. But here's my point to the American people. Remember, we've said on your show what my charity does. 90% of officers don't have active shooter vests. And that's what's necessary when you're dealing with long-range rifles. Concealable vest is fine for a pistol. But these boys are not packing rusty old 38 specials. They're bringing in AK-47s and others. And if we're going to ask our guys to be put in harm's way, which is what we're fixing to do, casualties can be expected. It's only fair to them to give them the greatest fighting opportunity to come home to their families. So please, make sure they have the necessary equipment before they go out and put their lives on the line to protect you, and to protect the freedoms that this country has always enjoyed.
David, what are your thoughts about the pick?
Well, I think it's an excellent pick. I think he's, as a former ICE director, he's spot on, and his desire to enforce the law, as any good law enforcement officer knows, is his job to do. And that's really the sad part is we have these wonderful border patrol officers, and they're not allowed to do their job. They've been purposed essentially, to be to facilitate an illegal immigrant invasion by what Speaker Mike Johnson has stated as 16 million people illegal since the Biden regime took power, and 25 million total illegals in the country estimated according to JD Vance, and that's quoting probably the best immigration enforcement think tank in the country. 25 million illegals, 25 million legal immigrants, so 50 million total non-citizens in the country with 285 million Americans. And, if they were all peaceful and law-abiding, other than, obviously crossing the country illegally, that might not be a problem. Obviously, there are economic problems that are come with even law-abiding illegals. The housing shortages, prices go up. Just imagine how much prices would go down if we deported 25 million illegals. I mean, housing prices, rent prices would drop, massively. And that's all part of the Trump plan is to prioritize first of all American citizens, and secondly legal immigrants who waited in line, came here legally, and are just trying to provide for their families, and get rid of a couple million criminal illegals that are commit violent or nonviolent crimes, as well as probably another 10 million that have committed identity theft. So I think it's critical we get control of our borders, especially with what I estimate to be 100,000 PLA soldiers in our country that have just come here in the last 4.5 years.
Okay, you said PLA? Would you please explain what that is? Because I'm reminded almost on a weekly basis that we have new people that tune into the show and don't understand sometimes all the acronyms. So,
yeah, People's Liberation Army. So that's the Chinese armed forces. Includes Army, Navy, Special Forces, Rocket Forces, Marines, right down the line.
We have those here in the United States. Are they invited in?
Well, it's an estimate. I mean, it's not like we know for certain, but we have 100, according to John Radcliffe, the former director of national intelligence, has stated repeatedly on Fox News that 100,000, military age Chinese young men have crossed into the U.S. Actually, he stated 100,000 total Chinese nationals, of which he estimated 85,000 were young men of military age. And some of these guys, they have their military haircuts. They stand at parade rest. They come in formation. I mean, all the things that you would expect enemy soldiers to do, essentially POWs to do. That's how they behave, and then we just let them free. And reportedly there are Chinese farmlands, large amounts of Chinese farmland that are located next to 26 key U.S. military bases, which they could use to attack, capture, or even destroy in the event of war with China over Taiwan.
Okay, I want to make sure that we get to Taiwan and some of those topics. Michael, you're nodding your head. You and I have spoken about this type of thing too. So to my Democrat-leaning friends and the people that are new to this, are there really PLA soldiers? Do you think they're PLA soldiers that would follow the Chinese, Xi Jinping's orders here in the United States?
There's no question about it. I've been on the border, and I will tell you some of the people that we've questioned, I think would be a politically correct word, actually still have their active duty military IDs from the PLA on them. Besides,
okay, wait a minute. So they have their active ID, meaning like their ID was from and it ran out in 2023, right? Is that what you mean?
No, not what I mean. Active. And here's what's so scary about it is a lot of these illegal immigrants coming in. First question is, where do I get my debit card? Where do I get my 15 and 10,000 a month for expenditures or incidental cost? They don't want money. These folks, they're already being paid. Now, why would you allow your active duty soldiers and continue to pay them and bring them across illegally into our country? We know where they're being staged. Arizona is being one of the key locations where they're at. Why is Arizona so important? Because we know that we have bunkers that have been discovered along the Arizona border where they're bringing in ordnances and armaments. We know that. And quite frankly, it's not bringing in a side pack of firecrackers. We're talking about heavy duty ordinances. Where do you think all the armament from we left back in Afghanistan, where do you think that's going to? We're going to get some of our stuff back, but we're not bringing it back. Somebody else is bringing it back for us. And they're going to be using it against us. And that's the scary part. They are prepared. They are getting in position and ready to go. I see this happening very rapidly because I don't see it just happening for Taiwan. Taiwan is very essential point. But I think this administration is not through yet. I think that they haven't given up. I tell people this. When you look at the depth of the anger and the hatred that went into this last election, you honestly think that goes away in a matter of 10 minutes after the election's over? No, they are replotting and they're figuring out what they're going to do. And one of their key aspects is let's create some civil disturbances. And once they get out of hand, we'll fuel them with some of the people we brought across. Then we can bring in the Pentagon. We can bring in the troops, declare martial law, and have a real field day then as to who's going to be the one in charge of this country. And, of course, they're still interested in taking out the president before he gets sworn in. So rough days are ahead. It's not behind us. It's in front of us. First phase was to get him elected. Thank God we did that. We got the real work ahead to protect him, to make him safe, and to protect this country from internal conflict.
All right. David, any other further comment on that?
Yeah, absolutely agree with Michael. Our potentially our worst days are ahead. I mean, we had a tremendous victory, and that was unexpected. It was a surprise victory for me. I predicted the exact results if the Democrats didn't steal the election, but I didn't have a doubt in my mind that they were going to steal it, and they didn't. Right. And the very fact that they didn't is extremely suspicious. The way they've reacted, it's uncharacteristic of Democrats to behave in a way that, we want a peaceful transfer of power. I mean, after talking about him as Adolf Hitler, a fascist dictator, existential threat to democracy in America, all the things they care most about. And Biden's meeting with Trump at the White House tomorrow, and it's rolling out the red carpet. Harris said, well, I guess she's the only one who didn't congratulate Trump. Biden congratulated him. And I think House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries did as well. But they clearly have something up their sleeve. And like Michael, I'm worried that it could be potential assassination of Trump, or else imprisoning him and perhaps killing him in prison. Although it seems like the chances that that's going to happen seem lower. Correct. I think if he does get assassinated, they'd likely pin the blame on Iran. It'd probably be the deep state that'd be responsible, but they pin the blame on Iran because now they've created this whole FBI investigation, which I think is real. I think it's legitimate. I think Iran really does have 3 to 5 teams of assassins that are trying to roam the country and kill Trump, but they'd be the fall guy. I don't think Iran's going to succeed. I think if you look at the circumstances of the first assassination attempt, it did have some of the hallmarks of, if not an inside job, someone, a compromised security detail on part of the president-elect that allowed the shooter to get that close and fire off 8 shots.
There's no question what David's saying is correct, John. I mean, you can't have accomplished what you did without inside assistance. I mean, it's just logistically impossible. So from a military standpoint, from a combat standpoint, sometimes it's best when you don't think you're winning to step back and let your opposition think that you're going to pack up and go home, but actually you're packing up and regrouping and implementing some new strategies and making some corrections in logistics that didn't work for you last time. I think that's where we're at.
Okay. I want to give a couple of thoughts. I want to share a couple of thoughts here in just a moment, but I think that to David's kind of first thing, I actually think that the election results were still skewed. I think Trump won much bigger than is actually shown, in the election results. I think though I think there's a lot of they pre-staged a lot of false results. Like there were, I want to say it was Michigan, but there were 200,000 votes cast and only like from 100,000 people. I don't think that was Republicans doing it. Just saying. Okay. Let me hit you. I want to go through a list of topics that I put out to cover that I know we're not going to get to all of them, but here's
We'll
just
try.
a few. Just in the last since Trump got the nomination and Wednesday morning, Trump's done a number of things. Trump or other nations have done other things because of Trump being in office. Trump appoints the first. Trump, the woman hater, appoints the first female chief of staff. The Taliban comes out and says they want peace with America and they want to be taken off the terrorist list. Yeah, right. I don't think so. Putin says Western civilization isn't the enemy. Mexico is starting to secure the border in response to terror threats. Terror threats? Right. Okay. Saudi Arabia tells Hamas leaders, hit the bricks. They're no longer welcome in their country. New York is starting to clean up their illegal immigrant crisis. Now this is one of the more deceptive things. Xi Jinping said China hopes for a peaceful coexistence with the U.S. and I'm going to say read into that. And they respect the American people. Read into that. This is my side note. Read into that. They wanted Harris and tampon China Tim Walz in office. Another topic. European Union chief announced on Friday that she asked Trump to supply natural gas to Europe and to get away from Russia. Putin says he wants Donald Trump's plan to end the Ukraine war and vigorously supports it. The Houthis are stepping carefully. I'm not done yet. We're getting close to the end, though. Hamas calls for immediate end to the war after Trump's win. That's interesting. Trump wants to push term limits for members of Congress. I'm against that personally. That's me. Former FEMA worker fired for ordering workers to skip Trump house in Florida and also in the Carolinas. Supposedly that happened. And then Rick Scott possibly being the Speaker of the not Speaker of the House, but the
Senate Majority Leader.
Senate Majority Leader.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to see that, but unfortunately, that may not happen. So John Curtis is sporting, I forget which guy, but it's one of the other. It's the minority whip right now. So there's a ton of things that we could cover. So one of the areas that David Pyne is an absolute, I'm going to say he's a genius on, but very, very on top of is China. Xi Jinping, what are your thoughts to how far off am I on what I mentioned with Xi Jinping saying he's ready, he's looking for a good relationship with the United States and they respect the American people? And what are your thoughts on what I interpret some of those words to mean? And China, Taiwan. What do you think? Oh, real quickly, if I was a bad actor anywhere in the world right now, if I was going to do something, I'd do it right now, in between the transit now and the day that he has put in on January 20th. I'll close my mouth. David, your thoughts?
I think President Xi Jinping is sincere about wanting peaceful coexistence with the U.S. I think he has some cautious hope that he could achieve a peaceful resolution of the Taiwan issue, which would include some form of reunification, perhaps along the lines that I've stated, which would be a confederation where Taiwan would remain autonomous, would have self-rule, would have continued control of its military, but perhaps on paper they would be part of China. I think that's something that Xi Jinping could live with. But short of that, he's going to blockade Taiwan. By next year at the latest. I know I've been predicting this for a while, and I was pretty sure it was going to happen in October. But my new prediction is it's likely to happen is exactly when you said, which is around the time of Inauguration Day, perhaps a little before, or if they think that Trump would, I think what they would prefer to do is kind of present Trump with the crisis on day one of his administration, in the hopes that he will want to diffuse a potential nuclear war between the U.S. and China. The problem is, I don't know if you discussed this because it sounds like I joined a few minutes late, but Trump has picked some neocon warmongers to be,
Mark Rubio. That's
Mark
the one that
Rubio,
works big time.
longtime cheerleader of the Iraq and Ukraine wars. Real hawk on Russia and China and Iran as well. And some of that's good to some extent, but not to the extent you want to get into a war with them. And then, of course, Michael Waltz is National Security Advisor. In both those positions, there were options for him to pick a kind of a MAGA, America First, official to serve in those capacities, and Trump chose not to do that. So every one of his, foreign policy and national security picks thus far have been neocons. So that's not encouraging. He's repeating the same mistakes that he made in his first term. Now, on the plus side, we have J.D. Vance. We have a vice president, quite the polar opposite of Mike Pence, who's absolutely committed to peace through strength, a Reaganite policy of peace through strength, and emphasizing the peace part. A strong military, but actually staying out of world wars with Russia and China that we currently can't hope to win due to the unpreparedness of our military that Senator Tommy Tuberville, stated so eloquently earlier today. So my concern is that China will perceive these picks, these key national security picks, which may include Secretary of Defense, because Mike Rogers is rumored to be on the short list, and he's a total neocon as well. Current chairman of the House Armed Services Committee. They could perceive that as kind of that Trump was not serious about wanting peace with China, and that he's going to pursue a more aggressive and confrontational approach, in which he would certainly likely defend Taiwan militarily. And given that China's not going to give up their plans to reunify with Taiwan by any means necessary, including force of arms, they could potentially stage a preemptive cyber attack on the U.S. homeland that could devastate our country.
Michael, your thoughts?
Well, one of the key things I want to mention that David just talked about is China is exceptionally prepared to launch cyber attacks. And I don't think this country clearly understands what a cyber attack is. If you stop and think about it a minute and you knock out our electrical grids across the country, we're in big trouble, because we don't know what it's like to be able to live without a cell phone that drinks electricity to charge it up. We don't know what it's like to be able to live without lights, without air conditioning, without heating, without refrigeration, without gas pumps to put the gas into the. This country would be in a huge situation that, quite frankly, we should have been prepared for years ago, and we're not. And so that is the key. I think what you have to look at is warfare is different today than it was generations ago. And I don't know that we as the American people have made the transition in our minds as what we're really facing. And I think we need to educate the American public as to how critical these roles are. And that's why it's so important, what David's saying. Be careful in the upcoming administration. We don't like the same mistakes we made before. You don't want people that are closely tied in with China. That's what you had with Joe when he was, the president. I mean, if you're beholden to the dollars that come from China and the industries that come from China, we've lost half of the battle right up front. So we have to, if we're going to make a new, clear path for America, where it's America first, America's safety's first, America's priorities are first, then we don't need the same old players doing that.
Well, what next subject do you guys want to hit of the ones that I mentioned? I'll let you pick, either one of you pick.
Well, there's so much. One of the things that I do want to make sure that I think is important the American public become keenly aware of is just how bad this issue of election integrity is.
Okay.
Because without election integrity, we do not have national security. And yes, you are right, John. No, the cheating was not nearly to the extent of what it has been in the past, but it is still even ongoing this cycle around. And if we don't have a full investigation, make it abundantly clear to the American people exactly what they've done, how they do it, and who's responsible, and then hold them accountable. They're going to do this every election cycle.
Oh yeah.
Sometimes it'll work, sometimes it won't. But I don't feel like taking the risk with America's future.
I think it's going to work. I think it's going to work most times, because I don't think I think the Democrats will wind up figuring out. I'm starting to hear from the Democrats realizing we put someone too woke in, and we were promoting too woke of policies. They're not going to, I don't think they're going to have that person in again, or they're going to be promoting those policies. So I think that, but we've got it happening today. Carrie Lake, I'm convinced that Carrie Lake won back in 2020 or 2022. I believe she won the governorship with all the shenanigans. If we didn't have the shenanigans done in Maricopa County that were done, like the wrong size paper being given in the Republican areas but not in the Democrat areas, I'm convinced they're doing the same type of shenanigans again this go around with Carrie Lake. I bet you, my prediction, we get on the other side and we get to see, when we get on the other side of this life and all the truth of the world is let known, we're going to find out that Carrie Lake actually should be in that Senate seat. She still may be in. We still may get her. She still may get there, but it would have been, I think she got there probably on a landslide. So when you talk about election integrity, yes, we've got problems. We've got to get back to paper ballots, just like Donald Trump said. The bottom line is, you and all of us are over the age of 50. Well, at least I think David is. I'm now over the age of 50. I remember going in and voting and having a paper ballot. And what they do is they hold up that ballot, and on the right side they have a Democrat, on the left side they have a Republican, or whatever the case may be, and they go, "This vote is for so and so. Do you agree?" And they all mark it down. And within 2 hours after the elections, we had election results. You know, in 2 hours after the polls closed, long as everybody was out. Sometimes it was 11 o'clock, but by the time, typically by 10:30 news, 11:30 news for some, but 10:30 news here in Utah, we knew the elections results throughout the entire country.
Well, you know, one of the things we look at on this, John, is we're not talking about a particular party being at fault. We're talking about the character of people being at fault. We've got plenty of rhinos, you know, in the House and Senate, people that benefit from the dishonesty with the American people. And it's time that we expose that. You know, it's one thing to be able to show a little evidence that, well, they miscounted here, or there was 200,000 votes, but there was only 100,000 registered. We hear that all the time, but then you don't hear anything that happened with it. What were the results? So did it change an election? Were people suspended? Did they go to jail? And the unfortunate answer to that question is no. And I think at this stage, and this is what we were communicating to the new administration, if we can't get a handle and make sure we have election integrity, then we don't have national security, because then other people determine who our leaders are, and we've lost the ability to govern this country. So I think just as important as it is to remove these elements with illegal immigrants, et cetera, it is just as important to put as much emphasis on determining and getting a problem solved of election integrity. And sometimes I wonder whether we put that in the back of our mind and we don't put that as a priority until we get to 2 or 3 weeks before the next election. You can't take care of it then. You got to take care of it now in preparation for the next election.
David, your thoughts?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think we need I don't know, is it the SAFE Act, or basically the bill? Yeah, the bill that would mandate voter ID in every election across the country, in all 50 states. Proof of citizenship. I mean, it's not just voter ID, obviously, because a lot of states give out driver's license to illegals, so that doesn't really tell us much. But that's critical. But I really do think that there were so many ways the Democrats could have stolen the election, and they made a conscious decision not to, not only for president. Remember, in 2020, they didn't just steal the presidential election, they stole the House and the Senate as well, based on my calculations. And then in 2022, They only stole the House or the Senate, but the House they let the Republicans take by a narrow margin when we were predicted to win by, have a majority that's 25 to 30 seats deep. We only had a majority that was 5 seats deep. So that's a continued threat. We're going to face it in the future, and I don't see an easy workaround for that, other than, of course, passing the SAFE Act and getting rid of all electronic voting machines, having just 1 day to vote, a holiday like a Saturday, like France does. I mean, France is a model. It's a socialist country, but it's a model for how to run elections. We need to copy them. We don't let any citizens vote. But I just want to reiterate what Michael said. The Democrats have a plan. They didn't just surrender power for no reason. They have a plan. They're regrouping, and I think they have a short-term plan. I think they have a long-term plan, and I think kind of the mix plan is essentially they're going to crash the country, probably the financial system, the economy. Shortly after, within months after Republicans take full control of the House and the Senate and the White House, and then they're going to be able to blame the Republicans.
Right.
It's going to be they're going to engineer a Great Depression, and this is kind of the best case scenario. There are other worst case scenarios, collaborating with their enemies to have some kind of cyber attack, like China. But I think minimally they're going to engineer some kind of financial collapse. Blame it on the Republicans, and then they're going to be hoping for a massive landslide electoral victory to take out both houses of Congress back in 2026, the White House in 2028. So it's good. They're planning something really big, and it's going to be bad. So we need to do everything we can to figure out what it is, and it starts with not just the border, securing the border, but also, taking back control of the FBI, the Department of Justice, so we can investigate, instead of investigating pro-life folks that are praying in front of an abortion clinic and arresting them, J6ers that were present but never entered the Capitol, throwing them in prison, 85-year-old grandmas. We need to, start weaponizing that against our enemies. And as much as I'd like to go after the Democrats, really just go after our enemies, the terrorists within, the PLA troops that are operating in our own country unopposed, unmolested, and any Democrats plots to, subvert, and try to devastate our country with this kind of, financial collapse or whatever else it is they're planning, because we need those counterintelligence assets to focus on actual real world threats and not, political opponents as the Biden administration has shamefully done.
Okay, so David, I'm there with you mostly, but here's the thought that comes to my mind. How was Israel brought down? It was twofold. They were brought down because of their wickedness inside their own country and because of their own doing within their country. That's how Israel lost. And I see the United States literally, when you look at the U.S. Constitution and you look at the Declaration of Independence, we are making commitments to God as a Christian country, in my opinion. And I see it's a very similar situation as it was as ancient Israel. And if we don't take care of within first the most, we're going to be taken out. We're going to be able to be taken out from the outside because we didn't take care of and get rid of the enemy within. And the enemy within is much worse to me and a much bigger concern than the enemy without. That's my personal opinion. I think you're somewhat there. What are your thoughts to that? And then, Michael, what are your thoughts on what I just said?
Yeah, I've been saying that for a while, that the greatest domestic threat, national security threat, doesn't emanate from, right-wing conservatives or patriots. It's been emanating from the White House. I try not to be too partisan, but it really is the way this administration has behaved has been in a very authoritarian and dictatorial fashion that we haven't seen I mean, maybe briefly during maybe the Civil War, maybe World War I or two, where Japanese, innocent Japanese were rounded up into internment camps. Germans were thrown in prison, mostly just because of they were their own race or
Right.
had their own ancestry. But for the most part, we haven't seen this happen before, and that's what makes it so wonderful that we won this resounding victory, because the kind of dictatorial measures they were taking indicated to me that they planned to stay in power indefinitely and to do whatever was necessary, much like the communists in the Soviet Union and of course the People's Republic of China. There is hope, but yeah, it's just a scary time to live with, multifaceted threats. I think you kind of alluded to the fact that we need to repent as a nation, turn back to our Savior Jesus Christ if we have hope of having the Lord's protective arm over our country again against enemies, foreign and domestic. But just a lot of different threats, a lot of different ways that the U.S. Could cease to exist as a country, and that's terrifying. It should be terrifying to every patriotic American.
I am so grateful that we didn't have a mobile altar of Moloch at the Republican Party like they did at the Democrat Party.
Yeah, that for sure.
I think that is a statement of how wicked so many of us are, and even as Republicans that we're somewhat that wicked, that we have allowed. What are we not doing to be a strong enough? And when I say we, I do not include Michael Letts and David Pyne in this, but I do include Talk with John. How do I do a better job of communicating to people and saying the two greatest wickedness things that are happening here in the United States right now is abortion that we've been doing for 40 some odd years. We have somewhere in the neighborhood, the size of the black population would be almost double its size had we not had abortion. And then the other great wickedness that has come because of that is the sex trafficking that we now have. Those are the two greatest wickednesses we have. We have other wickednesses, but if we got rid of that, I think we'd make a big step. And abortion, the fact that Republicans have not done a good enough job of telling the story of you are supporting killing babies as opposed to pro-life or pro-choice. Pro-choice is a choice for death. So, Michael, I'm going to turn it over to you real quick. Your thoughts on what I'm saying.
Well, I loved everything I heard from David. I love what you said, John. What I would add on top of that is, while we need to certainly drain the swamp from our federal agencies instead of them being weaponized and politicized, I think the most effective thing that we can do is to hold people accountable for actions. And let's just go back to election integrity for a minute. You show the American people how they're cheating, who's cheating, whether it's judges covering it, whether it's prosecutors, or et cetera. And then you put everybody out there, and then you show, now here is the consequence. Here's who's going to prison. Here's who's doing this or that. I think it puts the brakes on them doing anything else.
Or does it turn it into a tit for tat? That's my other concern is I don't want to turn it. I want to shine the light on the evil that's happened, but I don't want. My concern is the mainstream media guarantee is going to try to turn this in. Well, this is just a tit for tat thing.
But John, we can't be scared of that. We have to hold people accountable. Here's the basis. If I feel like I can commit criminal acts and suffer no consequences, even if kind of like it didn't succeed this time, don't you think I'm going to do it again next time and the next time and the next time? We have to make examples. I realize what the mainstream media, you are correct. They're going to say, oh, they're just being vengeful. They're being, taking out their tit for tat. Truth of the matter is, it has nothing to do with it. It has everything to do with holding people accountable and exposing the wrongdoing and then exposing that there's a consequence. We have not done that in this country, and we suffer for it. Look at where our young people are. Look at the rise of spike in violent crime, et cetera, et cetera. Why is that occurring? Nobody's accountable anymore. I didn't do it. The drugs you gave me did it, or this or that, or I didn't shoot the guy. The gun that I had in my hand shot the guy. Nobody is accountable for anything anymore. And I think we need to shock this country by exposing what is being done. You want to use the abortion issue. Let's talk about that for just a second. I think we need to trace where the money goes. Who's making all the money off of the abortion issue? And that needs to be publicized. People need to know, and they need to have an accountability. What's the penalty for profiting off of someone else's death? Those kind of questions, I realize they're hard questions, and I realize nobody wants to ask them, and nobody wants to think about, what it does, the uncomfortableness that it creates when you do. But if we don't send a message, I don't care what your party is, I don't care what your skin color is, I don't care what your sexual orientation is. You take an action, there is a consequence, and you will be held accountable for the consequence. You take a good action, there's going to be good consequences to your actions. You take a bad one, there's going to be bad consequences, and nobody's going to get you out of it. You're going to face those consequences yourself. It's time we as a country do that and do it very quickly. That will save the opportunity for them to continue to have this kind of evil conduct. That's what I call it, evil conduct that they do every election cycle and that they do throughout the elections, the administrations after that. It's time to put an end to it. The only way to put an end to it is people have to know there's a consequence to their actions.
Okay. Real quickly, I want to hit the pause button and just between the three of us. And we've got viewers that are tuning in right now. How late? So I told you, both of you gentlemen, we'd go roughly from 5 to 6. Mountain time, 8 o'clock Eastern for Michael. How much further do we want to go beyond 6 o'clock? I don't really want to go, I definitely don't want to hit 6:30, but are you good for going about another 10 minutes after 6 o'clock? Will that work for both of you?
I'm fine. The only thing I would tell you is if we go too much, if we go for another hour, I'm going to have to switch because the battery's going dead on this computer in about 45 minutes.
We won't go that far. David, are you fine for going to about 6:10?
Yeah, I'm good till 6:30.
Okay. Well, let's plan on, we're going to try to be done somewhere around 6:10 Utah time, 8:30 or 8:10 Eastern time. Sorry. Okay. We've covered a fair amount. We've really looked at the election, focused on some domestic things. David, what are, from the time with Trump being now president-elect, I'm curious where Vivek Ramaswamy stands. Would love to get Vivek. I would have loved to have seen him be Secretary of State or some significant position. Any inkling of where he may be coming in, and then also on the external outside of the U.S., what do you see on the international stage? How Trump coming in, and maybe we've talked about China, but there's also Putin. We really haven't gone into your thoughts on how Putin, Ukraine war, and so forth. Where do you want to take the conversation to as well?
Yeah, my hope was that Vivek Ramaswamy, that I worked for as his defense and foreign policy advisor during his presidential campaign, would have ended up as Secretary of State or Secretary of Homeland Security. Unfortunately, it looks like both those positions have been decided with Trump deciding to pick Governor Kristi Noem to be the next Secretary of Homeland Security. I think she'll do a good job. I think she's competent. I haven't really heard her speak out on the issues that we're talking about, but I think she'll be a loyal. She's not going to actively oppose the Trump agenda when it comes to, deporting 25 million illegals. At least I wouldn't think so. And to be honest, I don't really think that Trump's going to go that far. I'm not sure. I think he's sincere about deporting millions of illegals, but I think he's definitely going to deport the illegal criminals. I would be surprised if he tried to deport all 25 million. I think logistically it would be difficult. I'd love to see progress along those lines, 5, 10 million. That would be a great accomplishment in and of itself. But as far as Vivek, I think right now he's apparently one of the top, the final two finalists for consideration to replace J.D. Vance in the U.S. Senate from Ohio. Ohio Governor Mike DeWine gets to make that decision, but reportedly, if Trump were to give him a call and pressure him to pick Vivek, He would do so reluctantly, just as kind of a loyally based on the fact that Trump is the president and wants someone who's loyal to his America First agenda. I think otherwise that seat is going to be filled by a rhino, and then Vivek probably wouldn't have a government position above, say, a deputy secretary of perhaps Homeland Security or something like along those lines, which he could, he would excel at. He would excel as, in virtually any role, and a deputy secretary of a number of agencies would be something he would do very well at and could contribute to our country. But as you said, I'd rather see him in a higher role. I think he'd do great for U.S. Senate as well. So we'll just have to see. But it looks like so far, there haven't been an America First picks for Trump's cabinet in the areas of foreign policy and national security. Homeland Security, that's a real solid pick for Bordazar. I wish he was he was the Secretary of Homeland Security, but I think Bordazar, if he's given wide leeway to enforce Trump's border directives, he's going to be a tremendous force multiplier for our country in that role. And then I think Kash Patel at CIA, if that pans out, based on what I'm hearing, he's the pick for CIA director. He'd do a great job there too. So really, the two roles that we're waiting for are Secretary of Defense and DNI, of course, Director of National Intelligence, that I think are going to be critical to determining the course of the Trump administration, whether his directives will be supported or whether they'll be pushed back on. So, given the current picks, that does give me a pause when it comes to the war in Ukraine. Trump has said he wanted to end that war in 24 hours. His Rubio as Secretary of State and Mike Waltz as National Security Advisor. I think they're going to try to walk that back a bit. I think they're going to try to persuade him to give Putin, peace terms that Putin's not going to accept. And that's basically, there's a couple plans that have been floated. J.D. Vance's plan is the best. It incorporates a lot of the peace proposals that I proposed in the national interest back in October of 2022 with my armistice proposal that would include, neutrality for Ukraine. That was always been Russia's number one goal to achieve, not that Ukraine would have become, a satellite state of Russia or even an ally, but simply a neutral buffer state as it was from, 1991 to 2014 before the Biden authorized coup that overthrew the pro-Russia democratically elected president Yanukovych from power in Ukraine. And it would include a DMZ, that would be patrolled perhaps by UN or OSCE peacekeepers, and would maybe presumably include some kind of security guarantees that if Russia were to attack Ukraine again, in the event that Ukraine was fully compliant with the peace terms, that would be viewed as an unprovoked aggression. We could resume massive arms shipments. So it has a lot of good components, but kind of the neocon heavy plan, I'm calling it, would be like a 20-year moratorium on Ukraine membership. I think that's a non-starter. Would include continued massive arms shipments to Ukraine. Putin's not going to accept that by any means. He'll keep fighting the war. And I think what's going to happen is, so the initial terms that Trump will be persuaded to give Russia will be unacceptable. Putin will say, happy to talk, but the war's going to keep going until we get a proposal that's minimally acceptable to the Russian Federation. And then I think Trump's going to get tired of it, and he's going to say, look, I promised to end this war. We're going to give Russia the minimally acceptable terms that they need to save face and end the war. And then the war is going to end. There's going to be a permanent ceasefire. But that could take months, instead of days, as I was predicting before. With these picks, I'm worried that it could take months. And that's going to increase the chances that, we're going to get into a hot war with China, and Russia might end up fighting on China's side. So that's the exact opposite of what Vivek and I proposed with our Ukraine peace plan that he published in June of 2023.
Michael?
Well, a couple things. One of the advantages I have over both of y'all is I've got a chief aide here giving me the news as it breaks. Looks like Vivek has been tapped now to co-chair the Government Restructuring Commission with Elon. So that pretty much takes care of where he is headed. I agree with what David's saying. I do think there is tremendous pressure, though, from what I'm gathering on the inside of the administration. We're tired of sending money to Ukraine. And because of that, they're going to have to do something to end this war with Ukraine immediately. The military-industrial complex, I agree with you, David, that's not in their best interest. They will pressure their supporters to extend it out as long as possible. I think there could be an extension of terms being talked out a while, but I don't think there's a whole lot of negotiating room to continue to fund. I think, and if you don't fund, you pretty much force the hand on some kind of negotiations because Ukraine can't run this without money. So I see that moving very quickly along those terms. When you talk about Homeland Security, David, I would agree with you wholeheartedly. I mean, I think Christie's a wonderful young lady. I think she's very loyal, but I don't see any credentials. There are certain positions to where, I mean, I understand loyalty is a key element, and I agree with that. But sometimes you can't sacrifice credentials just because of loyalty. You got to have a good combination of both. And I don't see, I've already expressed this to the administration. Doesn't make any difference what I think. They're going to make the final call. But I'm having a hard time seeing where the credentials lie for Homeland Security. That is a law enforcement position. I would like to think that you at least have some kind of credentials and some kind of background in law enforcement, or at least at a minimum military experience. I don't see either here. So what it means is you're going to be a great mouthpiece, but the operations itself are going to have to be run by people on the know on the inside of the agency. And we got a real mess in that agency. We got a bunch of people that are going to need to be flushed. And so maybe that's part of the plan. Put the spokesperson at the top and then flush out all the bad and replace it with key people who understand law enforcement, et cetera, and have them as key advisors. That remains to be seen. But that's my concern on that. But again, we're much better off than where we're at. I think we need to this perspective, John, compared to where we could have been.
Oh, man.
Differently 7 days ago. I'm very grateful for us to be having these discussions now. I may not agree with the outcome on every one of them, but I am so much more thankful that we're having these discussions and that even with the ones I don't agree with, we're 10 times better off than we were before.
So another breaking news. And one of you may have already covered this, and I'm just a moron and missed it. President Trump nominates Peter Hegseth for Secretary of Defense.
Correct.
Wow, you're kidding?
No,
according this is being reported on the Gateway Pundit.
About 15 minutes.
So, what are your thoughts on that,
David? I'll let you take that one to begin with. I just ran my mouth.
My gut feeling is he's another neocon. I mean, obviously, I think his military service is very admirable. He's a combat vet, so he definitely checks all the boxes. He's well-spoken. I think his heart's in the right place. I feel like, and I'd have to, kind of review some of his statements. I'm not sure if his policy, positions are in line with Trump's on Ukraine policy. But given the fact that he doesn't have a background in government, I think he'd be more likely to, execute Trump's orders and directives in terms of, and maybe he wouldn't even have that much of a role in determining, our national security policy. Maybe just kind of, firing all the woke generals. I mean, that's kind of the number one priority for a SecDef, I think, at this point, at least on day one of the administration.
Do you think he would do that?
Oh yeah, no question. Yeah, he'd be good at that. I just, kind of what Michael Letts has said. He doesn't have a lot of credentials other than his military service. I don't know if he was a lieutenant or an NCO or a captain. Have to double check on all that. And it's not unusual to fire, to appoint someone with little to no, national security credentials. So he definitely does better than many few past appointees for Secretary of Defense. But we'll just have to see. I think he's definitely better than some of the other options. Robert O'Brien is he's a great thinker, but he's too hawkish. So I'm glad we didn't pick him. Obviously, Pompeo would have been even worse, and Trump was wise to rule him out.
I am so glad when he announced that. I think it was like Sunday about Haley and Pompeo. I was like, yes, thank you. At least those two aren't getting in.
Yeah, I think it would have been helpful if we had someone with some kind of defense experience. But he could surprise me. He could end up being a breath of fresh air as Secretary of Defense.
Michael,
I think what he's been brought in for is just what you alluded to, David. He's going to eliminate the woke generals, and if he gets that accomplished, hoorah! I mean, you got a full-fledged salute from me. Yes, there could be stronger credentials and key elements, but quite frankly, that one mission alone will change the course of history for a long time to come, and that's what we need to get done. Tired of having woke generals who like to put us in conflict situations that have no basis or no bottom line ROI for the United States. And we are not the world's police. We never should have been. America first, and what is in the best interest of America and our soldiers and our military is what should be the driving force, instead of trying to figure out how to engage the military complexes and how they can sell more armaments. One of the big problems we had in Ukraine. That's why they push it so hard. Bring them into NATO. Now they've got to refit their entire logistics and their entire equipment role with stuff that we sell. Well, what a great way to boost the industry.
It's money.
But that's not where this country needs to be. Those days need to be behind us, not ahead of us.
Well, I had a thought come and go. So I want to see that it will be good to not have a general that I'm concerned that he's going to be calling China before he calls the president.
I think you got that in this nomination. I think you do.
So, especially the chairman of the Joint Chiefs.
That's really the next order of business, isn't it? CQ Brown is the top #1 woke general. He's very woke, and that's exactly why he was tapped to be a chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. So he's good. I mean, he's good on some issues. So I won't take that from him. He's definitely competent, but he's very, very racial. I was going to say racist, but he's. He wanted to purge the white officers from the Air Force, kind of reduce it down. What was it, 43%, down from 75%. So just on the basis of race, and that's the kind of Marxist woke ideology that gets us in trouble. Whether it's airline pilots, we've seen that happen with some airlines where they promote less qualified minority applicants over folks that are former Air Force colonels, and we can't have that in the military, because our military is less prepared and less powerful, vis-a-vis our enemies than we've ever been, probably since the War of 1812.
I would agree, and I think it's great to bury DEI once and for all. And that's why they need to make sure that they have these right people in there to do that. And I think we've got some safety in what the nominee he's looking for now in doing that. And so I'm pleased with that. I mean, we can always supplement some more with logistics and all down the road when we need to. But sometimes you got to have somebody who's got enough backbone to say enough's enough. And that's what we're counting on.
Well, we're coming up on it. Any last thoughts that you go, boy, it's for the audience, this is significant. Maybe it's not being talked about a ton in the news. Anything significant that comes to mind with the Trump nomination. Let me be clear. I'm praying for basic 3 parts of prayers when it comes to my nation. Number one, when it comes to the presidency. Number one, Heavenly Father, please keep Trump alive. Number 2, please keep Kamala and Joe Biden alive, And number three, thank you so much for allowing Donald Trump to be nominated and the president-elect. Those are my three thoughts. But you don't even need to follow that. Last thoughts. We're like 6:08, and so I want to wrap this up here shortly. We can go. If we're at 6:11, that's fine with me. But last thoughts from both of you of something maybe we haven't covered that you go, I think this has been significant.
David, you go right ahead, and anything you got on your mind?
Well, I just want to mention that, and we probably talked about this, but the Senate Majority Leader race, both the leadership races for Senate and House are tomorrow. And, we're going to have a good Senate Assistant Majority Leader in John Barrasso. He's, he kind of has a neocon past, but he's kind of wakened up to the America First side. He voted against the Biden Ukraine war package of $61 billion earlier this year. And so I think he's come around. He's the most reliably pro-Trump, and he's unopposed. So that's a win. But we're at real risk of electing Senator John Thune as our majority leader. Reportedly, he had, I think, 24 out of 52 or 53 votes locked up. And it's going to go to a runoff. So the third place finisher would be knocked out of contention. And then, it's going to be a one-on-one race. I'm hoping that Scott can beat Cornyn in the first round. Then he goes to one-on-one race, and hopefully some of Cornyn's people will, come over to him. Hopefully most of them will, and he can pull off a narrow win. But he has the most momentum, at least, in terms of endorsements. He's got the most actual endorsements of senators, which is impressive. I wish that President Trump had endorsed him. I think he could have pushed him over the top. So it's going to be a tough win, if to a hard fought campaign for him to pull off a win. But with the help of God and his conservative supporters, hopefully he can pull it off. And because he's the only one of the three that we can count on to push through Trump's agenda. A lot of your viewers may realize that Mitch McConnell, we had united Republican control of the House and the Senate and the White House during the first 2 years of Trump's term, and McConnell torpedoed virtually all the America First legislation that came out of the House. So Paul Ryan, he may have been more vocal against Trump, but he actually did pass through the Trump agenda, and McConnell used the filibuster to torpedo it.
Well, I will say this also. Mitch McConnell put a ton of money in Maryland where he should have been putting that money in Arizona. I think he helped sink that race. Michael?
Well, let me give one quick follow-up to what David just said. I believe you're going to see that endorsement coming in the next few minutes for Senator Scott from the president-elect. We'll see what that does at the end of the day tomorrow, won't we? And then the other thing I would like to remind us all as we close is we have an awful lot to be thankful for. We're not all going to agree on everything this new administration does. I've already got some disagreements, and it's only been a week. But thank God we have the ability to be vocal about it. We don't have to get every one of them the way we want it, but we're 100 times better than we were 7 days ago. And I'm looking forward to the changes that are coming about, and hopefully they're going to be historical changes in the near future.
Well, folks, it's not time to go to sleep. Just because Donald Trump's in, it is not time to go to sleep. It is time to work the phones and reach out to your representatives and make sure that we stay on America First policies, because I firmly believe America First is also Christ First. So, and historically, that's the way it sits. So, gentlemen, I want to say thank you so much for joining me. Please tell my listeners, I'm going to start with David, how can people find a little bit more about you and the platforms that you're on?
Yeah, if any of your viewers want to learn more about me or read my writings, please go to dpyne.substack.com. Again, dpyne.substack.com. That's my Real War newsletter. I write up a couple articles it's hard to keep up with events. I'm not someone who likes to write short articles, and so what happens is I'll often write long articles, and then by events are happening so quickly that part of my article becomes OBE, and then I have to rewrite it. So I may not get it out tonight, but I have a lot to say about all the stuff we talked about in greater detail, and that's where it's going to be posted. The membership is free. There's also a premium option if you want to read my archive from 3 weeks ago or more. Then you can do that. But then also the emptaskforce.us. That's our website for the Task Force on National Homeland Security, where we try to wake up our policymakers and brief them on the existential threat of super EMP attack and also cyber attack and nuclear missile attack. So if anyone would like to volunteer to help fill out our state leadership organizations, we'd welcome your support.
Michael?
Well, let me take the opportunity to tell the viewers and listeners, remember the days ahead may be choppy. The first line of defense is going to be our first responders and our law enforcement. So if you have the ability, go to our website. That's www.investUSA.org. It's a charity.org. And make sure you can contribute to put an active shooter vest on the officers that are going to be facing danger in the days ahead. Second thing I would do is say thank you so much for your believing in America. Some people lost hope, but hope has been restored, and we've got a lot of things to do in the next few months ahead. So make sure you stay engaged, and God bless you. God bless America. We look forward to doing this again, John. It's been a wonderful time. David, thank you for your time. We really appreciate it.
Thanks to you as well.
Well, gentlemen, if you'll hold on for just a minute, I'm going to end the show with this. Folks, I normally do this at the beginning, but I forgot to do it. So let me give out the show prayer. No need to bow your head, close your eyes. And I want to give out the show mantra. Show prayer is, I hope my show is a gift back to my forefathers, the founding fathers, and may it be an acceptable token to our Father above. Then the show mantra, where there is liberty, there is the Spirit of Christ. Where the Spirit of Christ is, there will be liberty. And the greater the Spirit of Christ, the greater liberty will be. These men represent the Spirit of Christ and liberty. Thank you so much for joining me today, gentlemen. And we'll